Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome back. So, nakapag-lunch na po ba lahat? So, we are now ready for our next two sessions. For the second session entitled Visions of Art Deco, may we invite on stage our moderator for the session, Mr. John Brian De Assis of the Architectural Arts and Built Heritage Division.
Good afternoon, everyone. Hope everyone's awake and filled after that and after our lunch. Okay, so let's get into it now. For this session, we'll be discussing visions of Art Deco. So we are looking at the examples and manifestations of Art Deco in the realm of the visual arts and design. So we're looking at painting, sculpture, and fashion design for this session. So with that, we'll also be looking at developments and parallel developments that coincided with the major shifts in the artistic sensibilities of the country. From painting, sculpture, fashion design, as mentioned a while ago. And with that, Art Deco became a transition between the old and the new ways of presenting the Filipino experience and identity to a wider audience. Now, without further ado, allow me to introduce the first speaker for this session. Our speaker is the director and chief curator of the Ateneo Art Gallery. Prior to this role, she served as visual arts director of the Cultural Center of the Philippines. She was also a regular faculty of the Department of Art Studies, University of the Philippines, Diliman, for more than 20 years. She also currently lectures for the BFA in Arts Management program at the Ateneo de Manila University, where she teaches curatorship and collections management courses. Please welcome Maria Victoria Herrera.
Thank you, Brian, for that introduction. Let me just fix my... So, good afternoon, and thank you for this invitation and opportunity to participate in this day-long forum on Art Deco. Okay, let me just fix my... okay. Okay. So it was more than 20 years since I was first introduced to the subject of my presentation today, the Italian artist, sculptor named Francesco Riccardo Monti. It was initiated by a research, the research was initiated by Silvana Ancelotti Diaz. Some of you know her as the gallery director of Galleria Due Mila. And this was sometime in 2003 when she approached me to help assist her in the documentation and research to add to the inventory of works of Monti after a book was published in Italy. So this is the book. No? It took us 2 years. After 2 years of research, we launched the first of a series of exhibitions that featured photographs of architectural elements, portrait sculptures, and studies by the artist. This was sometime in 2025, August, at the UST Museum. There were 3 exhibition venues after UST. We also brought the exhibit. This is the UST Museum exhibit. We also brought it to other venues where works by Monti are found, namely the Iloilo. In Iloilo, this is the campus of UP Visayas. I think it was already discussed earlier. And in Bacolod, this was the Bacolod exhibit inside the Negros Museum, which was then located at the old municipal building, the main municipal building. And then the fourth actually was at the Metropolitan Museum in Manila along Rojas Boulevard then. Okay. So Monti came from a family of sculptors, born in Cremona in 1888, the atelier of his uncle, Silvio, and his father, Alessandro, had established a reputation as makers of funerary monuments, mainly for wealthy families. These works were mostly rendered in bronze or marble. Unlike his father and uncle, Francesco Ricardo Monti, or Nino, that was his nickname, had the opportunity to take formal art training. At age 14, he enrolled at the Institute of Ponzone for Decorative Arts and Technology for a 2-year course in decorative arts. And then in 1905, he entered the School of Design of the Academy of Fine Arts in Brera, Milan, for a 4-year program. Here, Monti gained a strong classical training in sculpture. He studied ancient statuaries and works by Renaissance masters. So these are examples of the works of his uncle and father. The Monti Atelier gained renown in the late 19th century, at the time when the artistic styles of neoclassicism and later realism were in vogue. Their sculptures complemented monumental funerary architectural elements rendered in the same style. Their style of representation takes a narrative and even theatrical approach, while employing symbolic elements related to their subject and/or period. In the monument of Pietro Valentini, the subject here is rendered resting, yet in suspended motion, and I quote, "The statue seems to fall and lean against the steps, conveying a sturdy tension after what seems to be a long, laborious life." These qualities we will encounter also in the works of Francesco Monti. From childhood, he frequented his father's atelier when he learned both how to model clay and how to scale and polish marble. It was in this studio that the first figures and portraits were born, created with a loose narrative and precise modeling. His own practice developed around the first decade of the 20th century, continuing his family's tradition. Early projects were initially recorded under the name of Alessandro, but by 1907, at 18 years of age, Monti already took on projects under his name, the earliest being this monument to Zemira Zucchi. The full body figure here is ethereal and rendered in flowing and willowing features. Monti worked with the traditional materials and techniques of carved marble and cast bronze, which were familiar to him since childhood. Art historian Ragazzini notes that in the early 20th century, Monti's projects, as with many sculptors of the period, reflected the rising middle class in Italy who had gained more economic and political power in the different regions and municipalities of the country. Like his contemporaries, his personal style showed strong influence from the current trends already widespread in Europe then: Symbolism, Art Nouveau, and later Art Deco. Art Nouveau was a strong stylistic tendency in Monti's early works. He depicted deceased individuals as ethereal beings, almost angelic, if not depicted as one. Sinuous flowing garments and stylized decorative elements are prevalent. Art Deco, when applied in private commissions, depicts stylized linearity, with light and spare figures, depicted stylized figures with strong linearity and light and spare in decorative features. In the context of public commemorative monuments, for example, those depicting fallen soldiers as heroes, Monti created more robust and forceful forms, implying strength in the face of defeat and death. These qualities are evident in many projects after the First World War, not only by Monti but by other artists. In the rise of fascism in Italy, the period was characterized by a call to order. The years after the First World War The state favored the style that was described as, quote, returning to tradition, to an engrossed silence to classicism and monumental art. For Monti, this was not a problem. His public commissioned war monuments represented solid and muscular athletic figures, which drew more commissions between 1919 to 1923 in Cremona and in other neighboring countries cities in northern Italy. In 1924, Monti was conferred with the honorific title Knight of the Crown of Italy by King Victor Emmanuel, upon the recommendation of then Prime Minister Benito Mussolini. With a thriving art practice for himself and his atelier, the decades of the 1920s ended with tragedy. After winning another forthcoming project for a war memorial in Cremona, Monti's victory was published in the papers but was later reneged due to political maneuvering. The commission was taken away from him. A fit of anger embroiled him in a fight that led to a casualty. He left Cremona in a rush. This was sometime in December 1929, and traveled through San Remo, then to Nice, France, and then to New York. It was there that he met Juan Arellano, who had returned to America to study theater design in preparation for the Metropolitan Theater project. This timely meeting led him to travel to Manila, where he continued a prolific practice through his many collaborations with Filipino architects. His collaborations with Juan Arellano were part of various city planning projects in the Philippines. The first was the Metropolitan Theater, completed in 1931. Monti infused the theater's structure with figures rendered in the Art Deco style, classically monumental and allegorical. His limited access to materials and technology led him to work with concrete cast to create life-size to large-scale figures, whether both in the round and in relief. So far, we have only documented two pieces of bronze sculptures, and that's the Adam and Eve at the Metropolitan Theater. After that, later works in bronze are actually small in scale, no? And they belong to private collections. His sculptures helped enhance the ability of architecture to communicate through iconographic information. For the Metropolitan Theater, Siamese dancers are depicted in suspended motion and rendered with distinctly Asian features and proportion. Of course, his imagery today may be deemed Orientalist, but at that time, he was consciously exploring ways to represent the new culture he is engaging with. By incorporating figures not exclusive to the Philippines, perhaps there was an intent to create Manila as a culture center of the region. So these are some images. This is actually an archival photograph, no, of the relief panel, and I believe this was used as the basis to correct the reconstruction of the relief panels on the proscenium arch. These photos were actually taken before the renovation. We went inside the theater while it was still in very dilapidated, so hence the color. No? Sorry, wala ako. Okay. The city plan of Iloilo will be the first major project for Arellano, and which I'm sure was already mentioned earlier. And again, he invited Monti to collaborate with him for this project. These are archival photos, and the two images are actually from a page of a magazine. No? Here, Monti created allegorical depictions of law and order, having mythological attributes in imposing scale. Notice how the facial features are no longer purely Caucasian. The relief group above the arc appeared to represent a family. Considering its original use as the city hall, it may also be Monti's allegorical representation of the city, nurturing and keeping its coffers safe. Although rendered in somewhat classical Greek drapery, the woman and the two children are depicted with Asian features. So this is another project was the for the Negros Occidental Municipal Hall. During the planning, Arellano actually, for that plan, Arellano designed a water feature with provisions for 2 fountains. The first was executed by Monti, simultaneous to the construction of the municipal building. In fact, there is an archival photo of the building under construction and the pond already in place, and Monti's sculpture was already there. So this is intended to be a fountain. No? The second fountain was executed by Felix Garzon, a student of Guillermo Tolentino, which followed later. But let me go back to this. Here we see Monti's penchant for Art Deco, where he uses zigzag patterns incised onto the Carabao's mantle, as well as the exaggeratedly pointed horns and sharp facial features of the Carabao, among others. No, so this is, I was in Bacolod a few weeks ago. The sculpture needs repainting again. No? The faux bronze finish is already peeling. Okay. Arellano designed the Meralco building along San Marcelino, a few blocks away from here, in his distinct Art Deco style. The main body is rendered with round corners, and the tall facade of the entrance is topped with the distinct bamboo shoot finials. Monti's contribution was a visualization of what the company provides, a surge of power or electricity thrusting towards the sky. After several changes of ownership, the building was demolished and the relief was completely lost, I think. I hope I am wrong. I have yet to get an update on this. Another project Monti was involved with was with the Tayabas Capitol building, which was actually a renovation that Juan Arellano did after the design of his elder brother, Arcadio Arellano. So here you will see on top of the pilasters or figures representing different activities related to Tayabas, now Quezon Province. A recent attribution, I have not seen the actual building, but someone actually sent me a photo, and it might be also, the relief panels might be also by Monti. So if you look at there's a close-up feature. This is in Misamis Occidental. A collaboration with Pablo Antonio, the Preventorium was built as a tandem with the Quezon Institute, intended to be a facility to house the children of TB patients in QI and those children who had primary complex. Eventually, these were cases as abandoned children. There were cases of abandoned children left in their care, and eventually it became an orphanage. Known for his tropical approach to Art Deco, Antonio designed the building to be a fresh air shelter for the children. It was intended to be a sorry. So these are details of the architectural decoration elements that Monty created, and as you can see, the children are quite rendered very playful. If you are comparing it to earlier works he did in Italy, there are similarities in terms of poses, but the figures here are have a lighter feeling, mas masasaya. The portrait of Aurora Quezon is dated 1935, about the same time, during his early years still here when he just arrived in Manila. And I bring this up because the features of the First Lady has Art Deco elements. The eyelashes are actually rendered like triangles, or do they call it lozenges, I think. And then another recent discovery, thanks to Brian, who actually contacted me and Silvana a few years ago, is the cemetery, or a sculpture in the old Tayabas Cemetery. This property, or the sculpture or the grave, was of the Salvacion family, whose residence was designed by Andres Luna de San Pedro. So that was probably the connection. The four male figures accompanying an angel and carrying the body are depicted with features distinctly Filipino. If you notice the features of the men. By the way, these photos were taken by Silvana Diaz herself. Yes, you can imagine. And she was going up and down the other neighboring graves. Huh? Yes, that's dedication. In the post-war years, Monty's projects were mostly in private commissions for schools, churches, and in this case, a funerary chapel. These two sculptures are currently found here in this building, were originally made for two chapels of the original La Funeraria Pass along CM Recto. The building was also designed by Juan Arellano. Monty continued to use qualities of Art Deco in his designs in terms of lines, forms, and proportion. And then I'll just be showing a few other projects, post-war projects for schools. Of course, UST, the sculptures were done by Monty himself. There was supposed to be another set of sculptures at the other side, which of course did not continue. In Saint Scholastica, the carving, the modeling is by Monty. At Far Eastern University, 4 relief murals depicting different periods in Philippine history. And this is an attribution. A Sacred Heart at the UERM hospital. I'm not sure if it's still there, but I found out that the hospital, I think, has connection with a convent. No? So yung nuns, kaibigan ni Monty. The Quezon Memorial Shrine, or tama ba? Monument, was actually designed by Ilustre. The drawing on the right are part of his plans. And as you can see, the execution became more streamlined. It has House of Precasts worked on this project, and they said that Monty supervised the translation of the design onto on concrete. No? And then I'll just go through this. I don't have enough time. Another post-war project was for the Philippine International Fair. Monty did several sculptures. So recent studies in Italy described Monty's years in the Philippines as a period of artistic freedom. These were years when he consolidated artistic maturity, free from the limitations set by what should be appropriate for funerary or commemorative sculptures. Collectively, his works in the Philippines are known to convey more of the artist's passion for life, humor, and wit, which understandably could not be expressed in his works in Italy. These sculptures were also part of the fair, but are no longer in existence. No? We don't know where they are. I think there are stories that they were destroyed. Okay, just my time's up. Just to show you other familiar images. Santo Domingo, of course. And just the last, Monty was a key player in the post-war art scene. He was a board member of the Art Association of the Philippines and taught at the UST College of Fine Arts and Architecture. Among his students were J. Elizalde Navarro, Virginia T. Navarro, and Ting Ping Lai, and Anastasia Mamuyak, as you can see here. In August 1958, he suffered internal injuries from a car accident and dies a few days later on August 11. This was a few days before he was scheduled to receive the Papal Order of Saint Gregory the Great. His remains are in the San Felipe Neri Cemetery in Mandaluyong City. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that presentation, Ma'am Boots. I'd also like to point out that it is interesting to see in the works of Francesco Monti the intersections with the work of classicist artists and architects and the modernist artists and architects as well. Now, with our next speaker, we will delve more into this topic of the debate between the modernists and the conservatives in the art scene. No? So with that, our second presenter for this session is the professor at the Department of Art Studies in the College of Arts and Letters, University of the Philippines in Diliman, where she teaches art history, photography, popular art and culture, and Philippine cinema. She finished her BA Art Studies, MA in Art History, and PhD in Philippine Studies with a dissertation on political economy of digital cinema in the Philippines in 1999 to 2009 in UP Diliman. She is the author of Digital Cinema in the Philippines, 1999 to 2009, and Homebound, Women Visual Artists in 19th Century Philippines. She has also co-authored several books such as Philippine Art and Culture, published by Anvil in Sining na Sining Pilipino, published by UP Centro ng Wikang Filipino. She had a solo exhibit at VME Contemporary Art Gallery and UP Vargas Museum. She served as panel convener and delivered papers in several international conferences, and her works are published in several refereed journals and anthologies. Please welcome Dr. Eloisa Hernandez.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Let me just turn this on. Now, the great art debate of the 20th century, no? So very dramatic. parang action yung dating. But actually, it was very important in terms of how it would impact art history and all the art trends that followed. And before we go to the debate, I would like to actually introduce who were the conservatives in Philippine art. And at first, Brian told me to do a lecture on the classicists versus the moderns. But, you know, sometimes the terms are interchangeable, but sometimes they're not. So to be more exact, I wanted to call them the conservatives. Another word that would come into play would be the academics, because they actually started in the academia. That's why they were called the academics. And the person who first started an academia here in the Philippines is, of course, we all know, Damian Domingo. And that small school that he opened in his house for his own trainees in 1821, as early as 1821, eventually became the Academia de Dibujo y Pintura in 1823. The Spanish government would eventually assimilate that and call it the Escuela Superior de Pintura, Escultura y Grabado, whose teaching system was actually based on the Academia de San Fernando in Madrid, hence the term academic. So they learn, or what the students there learn is the academic style, meaning copying from actual artworks or sometimes copying of copies. So yung looking out into nature or looking at your emotions is not part of the curriculum. It's not part of academic art. Okay. This school eventually became the UP School of Fine Arts because when the Americans came, they established the University of the Philippines, and the UP School of Fine Arts was actually one of the three first institutions of UP. The two being the UP College of Agriculture and UPPGH. How interesting that it was art, medicine, and agriculture. And a key figure then was Fabian de la Rosa. He became the UP School of Fine Arts Director in 1926 to 1937. He is the fencing student of Juan Luna. He studied at the Academia. He was one of the first faculty members of the UP School of Fine Arts. And he was the uncle of Fernando Amorsolo. And if I show you their works, you will realize that they have similarities. And if I don't put the names, you'd probably think both of them are by Amorsolo. That idealized portrayal of nature, the sunset. In fact, hindi pa ito yung peak Amorsolo. This is not the beautiful quintessential Amorsolo with capturing the Philippine sun. So, in that school, Amorsolo followed Fabian de la Rosa as the director. Okay, so the pamangkin took over the reins of the school. And Amorsolo, this Amorsolo style became the style. In fact, that school was also called, not officially, but also called the Amorsolo School. Because the other faculty members would follow his style, and the students followed his style. So everybody at that time, they were painting Amorsolo style. In fact, if you go to some malls now, you will still see some paintings in the Amorsolo style. Because Amorsolo believed in the ideal portrayal of nature, beautiful landscapes, planting rice pero walang putik. uh, Harvesting pero ang sakit ng likod mo dapat pero nakangiti. Or a portrait amidst bulaklak pero parang hindi nangangati. And with Amorsolo, it was always a perfection of nature. It's not just copying of nature, but a perfection of nature. And he really showed the beauty of the Philippines. Pang DOT yung yung dating. Now, it has a lot of cultural resonance also because during the American period, there were a lot of American GIs who were coming here and they wanted to bring something home to their families and they wanted to show this is the land we conquered. And they would show Amersolo paintings. Women were taking bath in the rivers. So, ang ganda pala, beautiful place. This is our land also. These are our people. In that school also, there is classical the studying, the academic style of learning from old paintings, learning from old sculptures, and at the same time, having this, especially in sculpture, this tendency with classicism. When we say classicism, this is really yung going back to the Greek-Roman perfect body, perfect proportion. The left side is equal to the right side. You cut it in the middle, equal balance. The head is 1/7 or 1/8 of the body. May mga ganun yun. There's a classical tradition to it. And the main person who followed these principles was Guillermo Tolentino. Okay. Guillermo Tolentino, National Artist for Sculpture, became the UP School of Fine Arts Director in 1953 after Amorsolo. So you have three conservatives who believed in academic training, who were very classical. You had Fabian de la Rosa, you had Fernando Amorsolo, and you had Guillermo Tolentino. So this is the they are the institution. Okay? So sila yung conservatives. Now who are the moderns? The moderns are the rebels. Mga rebelde tong mga to. They said, we don't want to paint in the Amorsolo style. There has to be a different visual language. And life is not always pretty. So what is modernism? In fact, modernism, when it arrived here in the Philippines, it was already over in Europe and in the United States. Tapos na. When Victoria Adades came home in 1928 after studying in the United States, what he saw was a retrospective actually. Meaning, it was a finished, done deal na yung modernism doon. Because modernism arose in the 1850s with painters such as Gustave Courbet, who wanted to paint the proletariat, the masses, sila Millet, who wanted to paint real people in the third-class carriage. And they opened, and they started painting not the royalty or religious subject matter, but they started painting real-life people. So, modernism rejected history and conservative values in art. I will not dwell with the societal of industrialization, the people now going to the factories, etc., leaving that's another 20 minutes. Papagalitan ako ni Brian. I wanted to, but not now. No? So Gustave Courbet and Jean-François Millet in the 1850s started that germ of idea of also going against the academics. They were also going against academic art in France. In fact, they had this exhibition, the Salon exhibition, where all the academics were exhibiting, and sila Manet and all the other modernists, they were rejected, and then they went to another place called the Salon de Refusés, the rejected ones. Okay. Now, just to connect to Art Deco, in fact, not officially called a modernist, but Juan Arellano actually started as a painter. His interest lied in painting at that time, and this is one of his early pre-war works, pre-architecture works, which is The Forest. Thank you to Architect Lico for this photo. And as you can see, this is not your typical Amorsolo style of landscape. It's more gestural, and this is more impressionistic in terms of color. So actually, Juan Arellano really experimented with a lot of modernist techniques during that time. Now, modernism in the Philippines really started officially in art history with Victorio Edades, who is our national artist for painting. He went to the United States in 1919 to study architecture. He was friends with Juan Nakpil. But he actually went home with a Master of Fine Arts in painting. Okay. So started as an architect, ended up as a painter. And as a student there, he saw the armory, the traveling show of, the traveling exhibition of the armory show, and he saw paintings that were totally different from Amorsolo, such as Marcel Duchamp's nude descending the staircase, and the Henri Matisse blue nude. And it shocked him, as it did to almost everyone who saw the show. This really created a furor in the United States during that time. They made a lot of jokes about nude descending the staircase and the blue nude. But you can see, he would take inspiration with the distortion of figure of the nudes of Henri Matisse by doing his own version of nudes. So different from your Amorsolo, from your Dalagang Pilipina of Amorsolo. They are dirty, they are naked, their butts are sticking out, they are muscular. They look very hot, they look very tired. Okay? And if you look at the sketch, it's very multi-perspective effect. So the effect of Cézanne and Gauguin on the works of Victorio Edades. And when he exhibited this in 1928 in his first solo exhibit, people got mad. People said ugly. People said that's not art. Pero matapang si Victorio Edades. He didn't mind. He just, just continued painting, and eventually also did like this very, very Gauguin yung dating, parang yung Tahiti time ni But look, the Filipino, Filipino motifs, the Filipino images with the bulul, and who would make a portrait of a woman na nakatalikod? Yun, Parang napaka-anti-Amorsolo talaga in terms of, of depiction. Another rebel was Diosdado Lorenzo. Diosdado Lorenzo was a colleague of Victorio Edades. He graduated with honors at the UP School of Fine Arts, and he was part of the Atelier of Modern Art with Edades and Ocampo. And when Edades applied for a teaching position in UP School of Fine Arts, they rejected him, but they accepted Diosdado Lorenzo. So he was the only modern in the UP School of Fine Arts. Later on, Ocampo will be commissioned by Juan Nakpil to create a mural for the Capitol Theater. And he would commission, or he would get two assistants, two student assistants, both 21-year-olds during that time. The first one, Galo Ocampo, who in this work in 1938 Filipinized or indigenized the Madonna, the mother and child icon, following in the footsteps also of Gauguin, who did the painting with the mother and child in Tahiti. This is in the UST collection, by the way. Wonderful, wonderful painting. Okay. Galo Ocampo was the captain of the guerrilla movement. He also did intelligence work, studied at the UP School of Fine Arts, and went to the UST College of Fine Arts to teach. That would be the trend with the modernists. They would graduate from UP, teach in UST. So UST was the vanguard. UST was the center of modernism. UST was the rebels. No? Galing, no? And who later on became the National Museum director. And also at that time, 21-year-old Carlos Botong Francisco. So apat na. Apat na, no? Edades. Pero hindi natin tatapusin yung 13 kasi 2 minutes na lang yata ako. And he used expressionist colors and very slight distortion of figures, which is a reaction to the academicism or the academic art and the Amorsolo school. So if you compare this kaingin with the planting rice that I showed you earlier, you will see the difference between the conservatives and the moderns. And of course, this one you can see at the National Museum here. And this is the mural that I was talking about. And it was in 1935, Juan Nakpil asked Edades to make a mural for the Capitol Theater in Escolta. And then he asked Botong Francisco and Galo Ocampo to do it for him. So this mural does not exist anymore because it was heavily damaged during the war and then later on fell into ruin. At the time, the Guillermo Tolentino, Fermin Sanchez, and the other faculty of the Amorsolo, of the UP School of Fine Arts really said a lot of nasty things about this work. They said it's ugly, and then why are their hairlines serrated? No, yung parang may parang ginupit ng scissors na zigzag. No? Ganun daw yung hairlines. Two women that I want to quickly mention because they are also part of this history is Purita Carlo Ledesma, who established the Art Association of the Philippines in 1948, and Lid Arguilla, who founded the Philippine Art Gallery. In that Philippine Art Gallery, that is the moderns' home base, no? Together with the writers, with Jose Garcia Villa and all the other writers who would start writing about their ideas on art. Okay. Quickly, Vicente Manansala. Huwag yun nang bilangin yung 13 kasi hindi ko po masasabi talaga lahat. Who worked as a newsboy or a bootblack but studied in in UP. And H.R. Ocampo, who is part of the who started as an Amorsolo follower actually, but later on became a modern. He studied painting on his own. You'll see this at the Cultural Center of the Philippines. And Cesar Legazpi, who is who was part of the triumvirate of what we call the neo-realist. Okay. I have a picture of him here. I just wanted to show that another member, the 13 moderns were not an official group. In fact, different art historians would have different lists. Sometimes, if you count them, they're just 12. Sometimes it's 14. But I based it on Rod Paras Perez's book and the MA thesis of Arlene Bautista in 1992. Capas, who is here in the National Museum, one of my favorites. And, sorry, for others, mabilis lang po, because there's also Anita Magsaysay Ho, the only woman, and one of the earliest female students at the UP School of Fine Arts. Okay. They said that she wasn't allowed to participate in the nude sketching sessions because she's a woman. Now, the debate. It was Edades who fired the first salvo in an article he wrote for the Tribune in 1935, the case of the leftist in art. Because they were hearing a lot of the comments about the mural, they were hearing a lot of comments about his work, so he started writing. Now, for Edades, the focus is that modernists, they want to talk about or paint about the here and now. And the academics or the conservatives are stuck with the long-lost past. Okay? So parang archaeological daw yung ginagawa ng conservatives because they were just copying from the past. But the modernists want to focus on what's happening now. So it's about self-expression. It's not about copying because for him, copying is artificial, but their focus is on emotional effect and not photographic accuracy. But Tolentino got mad. No? Actually, galing, the battle of words started pre-war with long essays. Ngayon kasi, Facebook post na lang di ba? Tapos, maghintay pa siya ng war. Natigil pa kasi naggera. Tapos, nag-resume pa. 1948, banat na naman. Tapos, he would write letters in 3 parts pa. Parang isang sagot niya. 1 every week lumalabas. Nakakatawa. No? Long essays. But Tolentino got mad because he said the modernists are what he would call distortionist. No? He hated distortion. Mutilators. Okay. Deformist of the human body. Ang sakit ng mga salita, no? Worse than the primitive. I don't know what he meant by that. So he's very, very mad. And they would ask, what did Amorsolo say? He didn't say anything. He was actually very supportive. He just kept quiet. He was judged in the walkout, in the 1955 walkout of the conservatives. He was one of the judges, and he voted for the modernists to win. So here is an example. Tolentino, being of the old school, I naturally detest modernists and their art. They paint in crazy lines, produce works that belongs to the category of freaks. I do not like distorted paintings. Imagine this, they should not be shown to women in the family way. Sabihin yung mga pregnant women, and they should not be shown to children. Parang name-personal na si Sir, di ba? Now, academic art, what did Edades hate about academic art? He said academic art or the conservatives are just focused on copying. They just focus on the formula. They are just focused on their technique. And they're just focused on classical subject matter that does not exist now. And, you know, it's actually another modernist who said, art can never be rendered in the formula. And that's by Galo Ocampo. Okay. So he said, it's just you're just fooling people. But he said, no, you mean we fooled Director Fernando Amorsolo? He voted for us. May resibo. Okay, before I end my talk, I just wanted to show you just 2 examples. This is Guillermo Tolentino's Bonifacio Monument, very classical, restraint. No emotions. And Bonifacio, leading the people, no? Very emotional. Tapos, expressionist colors, action. Okay? With a tinge of some some transparent cubism. Okay? And when it comes to portrait, 2 portraits, 2 very distinct portraits. This is one by Amorsolo, and this is a portrait made by Victorio Edades. And you will see the difference between the 2. Okay. Thank you so much. We can talk later.
Doc Eloy, for that very enlightening talk on the debate between the modernists and the conservatives. Now, we will have a 5-minute break, so everyone can go refresh themselves and stretch. And please be back by 1:45. Thank you. Hello, everyone. I'd like to invite everyone to settle down. Please settle down. We will begin with the next part of the session shortly. Again, we invite everyone to settle down so we can begin the next part of our session. I'd like to invite everyone to please settle down as we will begin the next part of our session. So we are now in our third and last presentation for this session, and we will have our panel discussion right after this. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our final speaker for this session. He is a scenographer who designs for theater, film, events, and exhibitions. He attended the Master of Fine Arts program in theater design at New York University with a Fulbright scholarship and an Asian Cultural Council grant. He co-authored the book Fashionable Filipinas with Mark Lewis Higgins in 2015. He was also a lecturer at the Fine Arts program of the Ateneo de Manila and UP Diliman. He is the founding artistic director of TernoCon, a terno-making convention and competition aimed at promoting the Philippine dress. And he received the Gawad CCP for Design and Allied Arts in 2024. Please welcome Mr. Gino Gonzalez.
Good afternoon. I was given marching orders by Ivan D. to cover 4 decades with 20 slides. So I did 90 slides for you today. Okay. Shall we start? It's playing already. Okay. Okay. Sorry. So we're talking about the terno, and we're covering 4 decades of the Philippine dress. But before we look at these 4 decades, I'd like you to look at this photograph of a sleeve from the late 1800s. It's made of piña, and as you can see, it reflects the spirit of the times, the Victorian period. It's classicism. It's very fine work. It's billowy, and primarily it's dainty. So the next few decades will be a reaction to this kind of sensibility. So the evolution of the Philippine dress is primarily a reflection of an altered lifestyle and a shift in the national psyche. So the 1910s, 20s, 30s, and 40s reflect all of these changes driven by modernism as exemplified by the Art Deco movement. I must also point out that the Art Nouveau movement overlaps with the Art Deco movement. So a lot of the influences in the earlier decades would be from Art Nouveau. So we begin with the 1900s with the coming of the Thomasites. So the new colonizers, the Americans, send the Thomasites to the Philippines with teachers dressed in the Gibson girl style. So they bring with them not only education, but fashion as well. And they take these fashions to the different parts of the archipelago. So these teachers would dress in the leg of mutton sleeves. They're very inflated sleeves with bell-shaped skirts with flounces on the hemline, like so. So the Filipinas approximated the silhouette, but using our native materials. So instead of cottons and silks, we were using sinamay and abaca to approximate these forms. As you can see, there's already a movement away from the diaphanous textiles from the preceding decades. So yung mga pinya and the husi or the silks kind of become passé. So now we move on to these very, very tough open weave textiles woven in the islands. As you can see here, the woman is seated against an Art Nouveau chair. And this fashion also extends to the villages, no, to the barrios. They were not confined in Manila. And as you can see here, we have a barrio lass, quote-unquote barrio lass, with a bouffant hairdo and a serpentina skirt. So basically, the serpentina skirt is a voluminous skirt cut into two sections. So the upper section is almost an A-line, and it suddenly flares at the bottom through the insertion of semicircular sectors. So these semicircular sectors kind of ripple the way the Art Nouveau ripples, diba? You have these serpentine forms, diba? And the lower part is supported by a sinamay facing to keep it in shape. Here's another example of a serpentina skirt, again with Art Nouveau furniture in the background. So this form of dress, which we still call traje de mestiza up until this point, echoes the natural forms in nature. So the skirt itself mimics the morning glory flower. You know? So it's an inverted flower. And then by this time, the upper and lower garments start to match. So if you have a kambaya pattern or a window pane check on the upper half, you also have that exact window pane check in the lower half of the skirt. Now the joinery here, this part, is normally emphasized by the people who sew them. No? Normally, they either put a ribbon or a contrasting color on this part to call attention to the cut. And these would have very, very complicated cuts. No? For instance, if it's a zigzag, it's called the Rio de Pasig. Sometimes they would mimic a butterfly, which is called the mariposa cut, and sometimes it's a dove, which they call la paloma. So that's the 1900s. When we get to the 1910s, this goes full blast. No? So it's very much influenced by the Art Nouveau era. And as you can see here, the women are wearing sobrefaldas. So sobre meaning cover, and then falda means skirt. So basically, it's a sheer cover that goes over the skirt. So the main bodice, which is made up of a camisa, this one, and a panuelo, which is the fichu, and the skirt, which we call a saya. So normally when we say saya, it's just a skirt. It doesn't refer to the entire garment. And this black overlay here, with the exaggerated filigrees, is called the sobrefalda. After some time, especially in the mid-1910s, the serpentina skirt starts to collapse. So here we see the start of the streamlining of the Philippine dress. And here you can see an Art Nouveau pedestal on which we have an anahaw plant, which is the typical plant of the Art Deco period. At about 1916, the volume of the skirt completely disappears, and we now are left with a train, which we call a cola. So here's an example of a skirt with a cola, which we call saya de cola. And here we still have a sobrefalda with an asymmetrical cut. As you can see here, the upper portion is still inflated. But after some time, it will start to collapse as well, no? As we move into the Art Deco period. So we have here the beginnings of Art Deco, which you will observe on the edges or on the scallops of the panuelo and the mangas or the sleeves. The next decade, I think, is the most pivotal part of the transformation of the terno, the 1920s. So basically, in the 1920s, there's a shift after World War II in terms of the psyche of people. No? There's a drive towards modernity, and modernity will also fuel the arts as well as fashion. So in the West, we have what we call jazz music, diba? And then for jazz music to work, you would have to be able to move briskly to dance to it. And so the mode of dress from the previous decades no longer worked. That's why they had to cut the sleeves and make the dress more streamlined. And then the waistline dropped from the natural waist down to the lower part of the hips. Just for people who know dressmaking, it's on the second hip level. In the Philippines, we didn't necessarily go sleeveless, no? But what happened was we flattened the sleeves. So from the front, the profile is much, much slimmer already. And the person that's primarily responsible for this is the designer, Pasita Longos. So Pasita Longos is the designer of the decade. And I must also point out that during these two decades, the 1910s, the 1920s, 1930s, the designers were primarily women. It's not like today, diba? Most of the designers today are gay men, diba? Telling women what to wear. No? But back then, it was women deciding what they should wear. Okay. So here we see an example of a terno. No? And we have butterfly sleeves and a fichu, which we still call a panuelo, and a saya with a cola, with a tongue-shaped train. And over that, we see a sobrefalda with Art Deco details. Now, sobrefaldas mainly came from Paris in the earlier part of the decade, no? And they came here already, they were already finished, they were already cut. But after some time, a lot of the sobrefaldas would be done from scratch here in the Philippines. As you can see also, the skirt is very plain. So much of the detailing is left on the sobrefalda. Here's an example of a terno with Art Nouveau details that mimic natural forms like tendrils, vines, flowers. And here's an example of an actual sleeve and an actual panuelo. Now, the term terno, as Ino Manalo keeps pointing out, refers to a suit. It's a three-piece suit, no? But in the Philippines, the word got corrupted. No, it meant a set of clothes, no, or a matching set of clothes. And now we kind of forget that the terno has to match from head to toe. So the seamstresses or the modistes or the modistas were really careful about making sure that the upper garments and the lower garments follow one single motif. And they do that by way of embroidery, by cut work, or by appliques. Now you might think that we just kept copying Art Nouveau motifs from the West, but the truth is we also adapted it. No? So we would substitute it with Philippine flora as well. So this is an example from Bacolod, from a privileged family. And they used ringue or rengue material that was woven in Aklan. And they did dimensional detailing of coconut trees and coconuts all over the edges of the panuelo and the sleeves. Here's one camisa from the collection of Ramon Villegas. And you will see here, it's beautifully, beautifully done, Art Deco. And it's already at the transition, no? So that we're now moving into Deco territory. So the sleeves flattened by way of organized pleating. Because before, it was just shearing. No, but now, you need to make it stand up, really upright. No? And you can't do that with shearing. So you needed to have a structure. It's like architecture. So it's parang Art Deco movement din siya, di ba? Very, 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 very streamlined and very, very geometric. And this was done, the way it was held up was done through starching. That's why we have products like Liwayway Gawgaw. So if you look at the back of Liwayway Gawgaw today, you will still see instructions as to how you can produce the paste for stiffening the panuelo or the butterfly sleeves. So why did this happen? No? My feeling is that there was a shift, there was an obvious shift in the way women lived in the Philippines. No? So they were emerging from a very domestic milieu, and then they were starting to join the workforce or starting to go to universities. Diba? The first universities opened in 1908. And in order to do that, you can no longer wear those voluminous clothes. So you had to fit in. There was a sense of practicality that had to go with the way you move and the way you dress. Here's an example of, we still have some Art Nouveau pieces that mainly reflect the Jugendstil movement in Vienna or in Germany. So it's not much like the Art Nouveau that we see from the Americans. And here's an actual example of a dress from the period. Just to remind you that these are all colored. They're not sepia, no? So a lot of the extant pieces that we've seen are beautifully colored, no? It's not the way we dress today, na head to toe black, no? This was a period that celebrated color. So if you if you look at the Metropolitan Theater, in one panel alone, you will see 3 to 5 colors done in many kinds of materials. So it's the same thing. In creating these dresses, the modistes combine different materials to achieve an overall effect. Here's one Art Nouveau chair from Casa Gorordo. And here's an example of a dress that kind of mimic the detailing that we see in most of the grill work and the furniture. This is a wedding dress from Pampanga with an Art Nouveau skirt. The 3 women in Art Nouveau detailing, as you can see on the sleeves and on their sobrefaldas. Again, these were colored pieces that used silver thread, gold thread, sequins, and a lot of layering of different types of materials. This is another example of a piece from the period. This one was attributed to Pasita Longos. As you can see, there's an ombre, meaning there's a gradient from off-white to black. Now, this was done carefully by dyers in Manila. So before the actual garment is cut, the kanyamazo, or the open weave fabric, is dyed and custom dyed according to the swatches that they sent to the dyer. Now, the famous dyer back then was Atanasi Consul, who had a shop in Quiapo. And he also worked with Pasita Longos a lot. So as you can see here, the embroidery is done in a lot of metal threads. Now, this one is a clearly Art Deco influence on the camisa and the panuelo. During this time, they discovered the tomb of King Tutankhamun. So there was a rage called Egyptomania. So in the Philippines, we latch onto that trend as well, no? So the modistes created these elaborate sobre faldas that somehow reflected our idea of Egyptian design. No? As you can see here, there are central panels here, which kind of remind you of the Monty, diba? This section. So this period was inspired by Orientalism, which began in the 1910s. No? So parang delayed. We were still catching on with the trends that were happening in the West. But the most famous Art Deco dress of the period was worn by Pasita de los Reyes, who was the carnival queen, and she was dressed by Pasita Longos. Now this dress was featured in the book cover of Patterns for the Philippine Dress, produced by the CCP. And it has an ombre, no, from off-white to red. And as you can see, it has a complicated skirt pattern that had inserts or godets of white silk. Then over that is a sobre falda that's fully beaded with Art Deco motifs. But people didn't wear this every day, no. They had daytime versions of the terno, such as this. And this is a good picture because you can see Pasita de los Reyes wearing a daytime terno, which is normally made of cotton and less expensive textiles. And she's posing with an American wearing the Western fashions of the period. Now, this type of garment is what we call a vestido, not a vestida. So when we refer to Western dress of this period, we call it vestido. So by this time, the terno was in direct competition with the vestido. So ang outlook noon, kapag matanda ka, terno ang damit mo. Pag bata ka, you wear the Western dress or the vestido. So by the 1930s, Art Deco goes full blast, primarily because of the influence of magazines and radio and newspapers. So we had access to catalogs already like Sears, which would have a lot of these drawings, no, of different types of garments that people can approximate or copy. La Vanguardia also published a lot of these fashion sketches that covered Western fashion, such as this. But they also featured a lot of the ternos from the period, primarily from the carnivals. You know? So as you can see here, there were many variations of the saya de cola. And slowly, we see the sobre falda disappearing. So this is another point wherein there was a streamlining, quote unquote, that was happening. So after they lose the sobre falda on a plain skirt, you know, Pinoys have a compulsion to decorate. So they must find something else to decorate. So the decoration was applied directly onto the skirt via flounces and a lot of embroidery. And during this time, we see what we call a bias cut. So in the West, in Paris particularly, Madeleine Vionnet pioneered bias cutting. So basically, most of our clothes, like my shirt, your shirts, are cut on the straight. So it's a perpendicular line. In the bias cut, it's cut on a diagonal, which dictates the way in which it falls on the body. So basically, it follows the contours of your body when it's cut on the bias. So it's very unforgiving. Kita yung puson, kita yung mga bulges, etc. So this type of cutting gave it a kind of languid appearance, no? Almost like liquid. So people were using silks like this. This is an extant example of a pasita longo saya from Bawan, Batangas, worn by Esther Villena. So this is an example of the sleeve that was paired with that particular saya. Fashions were also dictated very much by the first ladies. And Aurora Quezon was a prime example of this. No? She wore a terno made by a young Ramon Valera for the Philippine Commonwealth. No? And then, as you can see, the skirt itself is cut on the bias in the way it falls on her hips. And then on the lower part over here, you see what we call godets. Godets are triangular or diamond-shaped inserts that are sewn in between the slashes to create some kind of draping or some kind of volume, which still falls. Hollywood was a big influence on fashions of this period. So remember now we have the cinemas, and naturally people were captivated by what they saw on screen and wanted to kind of approximate that glamour onto their clothes. So enter sequins, rhinestones, and a lot of glitz. The Manila Carnivals were was a big venue for fashions of the period, no? And it is typically where all of these new designs debuted. So para siyang Fashion Week, the equivalent of Fashion Week today. And people like Pasita Longos, Pura Escurdia would vie for the most coveted dresses during this time. Now, with Pasita Longos, for instance, you needed about 6 to 9 months to make a reservation for her to do your dress. And it is said that a Pasita Longos dress will do a young woman more good than the wealth of her family. So pag maganda ang suit mo, nakapasita longos ka, mas malaki ang chance mo na makakapag-asawa ka ng mayaman. So ganun ka-importante si Pasita Longos during this time. Unfortunately, we don't have a photo of her, the person. So Deco also extends to jewelry and other accessories such as this. And if they still wear a sobrefalda, it will be beaded in the Art Deco style. Sometimes, if you notice, the earlier trajes were very symmetrical. What happens on the left happens on the right. And there's always a central line, no? But in the Art Deco period, somehow, asymmetrical designs start to appear, such as this. This one was from Bacolod, from the Rizares family. And as you can see, no, it has an Art Deco detailing on one side of the skirt only. Geometric shapes were also in, no? Parang this was the time for Cubism. And polka dots also ruled or dominated in the terms of choices, no, for textiles. Here's an actual example of polka dots which were embroidered onto a kanyamazo. So kanyamazo is the fabric, diba? Sometimes it's called babarahin, and there's a local version called ringe or renge, which was woven in Aklan. Here's another example of an Art Deco mangas and panuelo. Now, you might say that these are all upper-class garments, but actually they're not. These are middle-class garments that were sourced in a barrio in Ilocos Norte. So there, more Art Deco with borders and geometric shapes. There were also very cubist types of garments, such as this. Hilda Cordero once told me, kasi sabi ko I was fascinated by photos like this of this type of style, no? But she said during the time, they considered this kursi. So parang baduy daw ito. This was, for them, this was yung suot ng mga lower classes. Ganoon. So the bias cut, was influenced, or rather was innovated by Madeleine Vionnet, di ba? And people here ate that kind of sensibility. You will also notice in this photo, and then you will notice in the 30s, there are a lot of photos of women with diplomas. No? So parang in previous decades, normally you would see them with a fan, or a pañuelito, or flowers. But now, things change, no? There's a shift in the psyche. And what I think, what's important with women in this period is an educational degree. Here's Victoria Lopez Araneta, one of the it girls during this period. So Victoria Lopez lived a privileged life, and she was dressed by the best designers, no, of the time. And this is a prime example of couture. You know, as you can see in the skirt alone, it looks like the material for Japanese obis. So it's silk and embroidery at the same time. This is her again in a pura escurdia terno. The graphic magazine in 1933 describes the terno as a garment that was worn in the fashion review held for the Anti-Tuberculosis Society at Manila Hotel. It was made of bias-cut black georgette with diagonal rows of small squares in embroidered gold thread. 5 minutes. So if you happen to see Bacolod, there's a boathouse there. And in the second floor or third floor, you will see a library with cobwebs and big spiders. So this was a time of surrealism, diba? And consequently, we found many ternos with cobwebs also, more than 4. And I saw an actual garment in Cebu City with cobwebs and spiders. So at the end of this decade, there's another streamlining happening. The upper garments and the lower garments become fused. So naging one piece na yung terno. It's no longer made of several pieces. And this was made possible by the zipper. So Ramon Valera was one of the proponents of this type of construction that allowed the terno to be fitted on the body. At the end of the 30s, the trains disappear because World War II was in the offing. So pag nangyayari mga kaguluhan, frivolities are diba discarded. So yung train na yon, which is really unnecessary, time's up. Tapusin ko na. So in the 1940s, pre-war, it became tiered like an A-line skirt. So it became simplified, such as this. This is Lily Padilla in a very, very relatively simple terno during the war years. So Manila becomes devastated by World War II, diba? And naturally, there's another shift happening during this time. And this is Alicia Markova and Anton Dolin posing in front of the ruins of Manila when they came here for a tour. So she was gifted with a terno. So post-war, when people were starting to emerge and entering Manila Hotel again, we noticed that the panuelos disappear. So it's a one-piece dress without the sobrefalda, without the cola, without the panuelo. So yung décolletage here is now exposed. No? So parang there's a liberation that's happening. So women were liberated from this cumbersome, quote-unquote, cumbersome accessory. So incidentally, the people who were creating these garments for this period were the likes of Salvacion Lim, who was also a fine arts graduate of the UST. So parang may modernism streak din talaga siya. And of course, there was Ramon Valera. And this is again Pasita de los Reyes from the previous decades, wearing a tiered skirt, panuelo-less, no sobrefalda, and no cola. So again, the 1900s and the 1940s, and you can see a big difference in the way the terno was constructed. So I leave you with this image of the Quezon Memorial. So on top of the tower, there are loose women angels perched on it, and one of them is a woman in a balintawak, and one of them is a woman in a traje de mestiza, and another one in a Muslim garment. So as you can see here, in the way it's represented, it's so slim already and so simplified. So that, I think, is the legacy of modernism in the way women dressed. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that very enlightening and very interesting talk on the terno by Sir Gino Gonzalez. No, it's also interesting to see that the butterfly sleeves that we see in modern Filipiniana is actually a vestige of this Art Deco development of the dress, and it's something that is still with us today. So with that, I'd like to invite our speakers again on stage, Doc Eloy, Doc Ma'am Boots, and Sir Gino for our panel discussion. We've had a very interesting discussion on the developments of Art Deco in the visual arts and in the design. You see that in this discussion you'd have also a lot of intersections and conflicts that you get to see with how these transitions in style happen from the more classicist and conservative styles to the more modern versions that the Art Deco has espoused. We also get to see how, even in the development of these different art movements, there are still a lot of affinities that they get to share, and there are a lot of shared histories and experiences that help them evolve into what we know them today. So with that, it's also interesting to see in the case of Monty and Guillermo Tolentino that they were able to work together at some point. No? So with that, Ma'am Boots, would you like to give a few words on that interaction of these two sculptors?
Monty and Tolentino. So this had to do with the design for the Rizal Monument. The Bonifacio Monument. So obviously, Guillermo Tolentino won the commission, but to cast it in bronze was quite challenging. Technology was not available in the country, and during that period, it was said that the different sculptors actually work together, especially for big projects like the Bonifacio Monument. Monty's assistance was actually in the form of bringing the team to Cremona, to Italy, and have for the fabrication of the sculptures. It is not how would I say, written. But if you look at different figures of the monument, some figures of the monument, especially that figure that's lying dead, is very similar to one of an early work by Monti, the image that I showed earlier, a war monument. So it's possible that in the process of creating the molds, modeling the figures, Monti was not just watching Tolentino, but was involved in the actual process of molding the clay before casting. That trip was said to be the last trip Monti made to Italy. He never went back. When the monument was brought over, and of course there was a big parade to unveil the monument. So that was the extent. It was quite extent of involvement, no, of Monti. I would say was quite significant. If you are to look at the figures, some of the figures, which at that point were not distinctly Tolentinos, because it's very classical. Many of there was a strong, I would say, romantic quality to the rendering of figures in the Bonifacio monument. Kasi ang bet may idadagdag, tumayo eh. Mamaya.
And also to add to that, it's also interesting how Francesco Monti also worked with a more novel material when he went here to the Philippines, so when he embraced the use of concrete in his works. And I'm also interested to see how other visual artists were able to apply this embracing of the materiality of the works that they, of the medium that they deal with. So, Doc Eloy, maybe if you could give a few thoughts on that.
Okay, so the modernist artists started experimenting with materials, different materials, not just oil on canvas, which was the academic tradition during that time. So, for instance, Anita Magsaysay-ho experimented with tempera, and she became very good with that. And another modernist sculptor, Napoleon Abueva, of course, started using local wood, indigenous wood for his sculptures instead of just using marble or bronze. That was the academic tradition during that time. So the experimentation of the moderns was not just in how they depicted reality, but also in terms of material. If you look at the Brown Madonna of Gallo Ocampo, in fact, the frame is carved wood. Bamboo.
Small strips of bamboo.
But nag-extend siya sa labas ng frame,
it's it's assembled. Small, thin bamboo.
It's like little slabs, right? Yeah.
So, and it's actually attached with copper nails.
There you go.
So until now, it's actually in very good condition.
There you go. So instead of the usual, framing, even the frame became part of the
escayola.
Became part of the artwork. So definitely experimentation in terms of subject matter, material, and technique.
If I may add, actually before Anita, Diosdado Lorenzo, who taught at the Manila Atelier, which was co-founded with Nakpil and Edades, had early paintings that he did when he was in Hong Kong. He painted portraits, landscapes, and genre scenes with oil directly on raw wood. And he used the wood as part of the image, the composition, which Anita actually used in her tempera work, Laughter. So, yung skin tone is actually raw wood. Diosdado Lorenzo did that earlier. There are a number of works in the UST Museum collection that are from that period. And he used very impasto application of paint. So it's very rich na again, very against the style of, or the technique of Amorsolo and his colleagues.
The Stations of the Cross at the UP Chapel is also not oil on canvas. I think it's oil directly on the
Lawanit.
lawanit.
It's
On fiberboard.
Oh, so lawanit, which is considered before like a lower level type of wood, no, that doesn't last, was also used for as an art material.
Okay, so just continuing the idea of embracing the materiality of and the eccentricities of the materials that are used in the creation of these works. So I'd also like to know, siguro, elaborate a bit more, Sir Gino, on how designers also embraced this in the use of in the creation of their ternos. How was the you know, these eccentricities of the material embraced by designers?
The 1920s kasi, in the 30s, diba, there was a NEPA movement, the National Economic Protectionism Association, which was promoting a lot of the local textiles as a form of protectionism against all the importation that was happening, diba? There was a lot of importation from the US and from Europe and from the neighboring countries. So there was quite a range. You know? There was still a lot of textile being woven primarily in the Visayas, in Batangas, even in Bulacan, plus all the imported items that were coming from Switzerland, from Japan, from Manchester in England. So the designer had a lot of tools back then. So, and you can see it in one small panel, you would see at least 3 to 4 materials happening. So I saw one Pasita Longos, which had gold chantilly lace, it had open work, it had satin, tapos it had beadwork. So parang they were using everything in the same way that architecture was emphasizing the different types, or the what you call the innate qualities of these materials to shine forth.
And siguro to tie it back as well to visual art, there's also the idea of how the work, or rather this Filipino dress and its depiction in media helped make it much more widespread to a wider audience. So siguro, could you give us a bit of your thoughts on that?
Today or
in the past, like for example, in the 1930s, they'd also be a bit more deliberate with the use of or depicting Filipinas in the Filipino dress, and yeah.
We really have to credit Amorsolo for that, and Botong. So yung iconography ng Philippine dress, especially the balintawak in the rural areas, was really solidified by Amorsolo. And then Botong captured all the other costumes, quote-unquote costumes. We avoid calling them costumes because they were not costumes during that time. They were what people wear every day. And of course, unlike the 1800s, we now had cinema and a lot of magazines, diba? After the Suez Canal opened, there was an influx of materials from other parts of the world. So yung lag time before, for instance, in the 1800s, parang it would take 10 years for the fashions to arrive, literally by boat. No, for now, given the shortened travel period, fashions would come in 2 to 3 years already.
So with that, could we also get your thoughts on that spread of the terno? Can we also get your thoughts on that idea of the spread of the popularity of the terno?
Of course, other sculptures, no? Like even the works of Guillermo Tolentino. So that would be part of it. But you know, the works of Amersolo, let me just go back to Amersolo, it's not just paintings. Huh? He was actually designing our books, our textbooks. So when you open a textbook during that time, like even in the 1970s, bata pa po ako noon. Hindi ko naabutan, na kwento lang. But when you open textbooks during that time, it was Amersolo drawings, and they were wearing terno in their everyday. And even in his advertising, no? For Dove, for Buick, and the people, the women there, they were wearing terno.
Kasi di ba yung Art Nouveau primarily was a reaction to the Industrial Revolution. There was a return to the natural forms, ganon, di ba? And I think parallel to that, yung Amor Solo period is primarily a reaction to this onslaught of Americanization through iconography. Yung parang, eto kami. Ganito ang itsura namin, ganito ang kapaligiran namin. So, parang it was, well, you can call it propaganda. No? Parang it was a way to reinforce Filipino-ness by way of the arts.
Okay, so I think we'll wrap it up at that. But we'll now open the floor for questions from the audience. So let's see, sir, there at the back. Yeah. Yeah, can we have a mic for him? But yeah.
Hello. Hello, good afternoon po. Just a quick question. I'm Andre po pala, a heritage enthusiast. What I like to do as a hobby is to document monuments, one of which includes Francesco Monti's works. And I would just like to ask Ma'am Butch if there are ongoing efforts in Ateneo Art Gallery to document the Francesco Monti here in the Philippines.
Sorry.
Rinig po ba? If there are ongoing efforts to really document comprehensively yung mga gawa ni Francesco Monti dito sa Pilipinas. Because in the process of documenting, as a hobby, no, in the process of documenting Francesco Monti's works, may mga na-encounter po ako like sa Letran, yung the old INC Central Temple sa San Juan. Sabi daw nila gawa daw ni Monti yun. Sabi ng mga elders. Pero more on oral claim lang yun eh. So more on attribution. And we don't have any existing document where we can, yung ibabangga mo to verify if those are works of Monti. So I would like to ask ma'am if there are efforts from your end or Ateneo to really come up with a comprehensive list of Monti's works in the country. Thank you po.
Thank you for that question. First of all, this research project doesn't have anything to do with my position in Ateneo Art Gallery. It started way before I joined Ateneo. Which was in 2015. So it's an ongoing project. Silvana and I are continuing. That exhibit and the initial documentation we did for the 2005 series of exhibitions was funded by NCCA. After that, meron kami mga nahanap na dinadagdag namin. I couldn't hear what you said earlier, but the parochial school in Tayuman, those are Monti sculptures. Sorry. Espiritu Santo, yes. Meron pang, I can't remember. Well, meron sa Dumaguete, we visited. There's a fountain there. Another sculpture in Iloilo, in the Plaza of Molo. So in that modest monograph that we produced, we were able to document several, but it seems there are more. I couldn't say off the record, no. This is not yet official, but someone asked me to prepare a proposal for a book, which I have yet to sit to focus on. But that's something. I've been talking to Silvana and siguro in relation to Ateneo Art Gallery programming, we're trying to look for the photographs, the set of photos that we toured. It's in her storage somewhere, and depending on the condition, Actually, we would like to present it in Ateneo, at least to, refresh people's memory and reintroduce Monty again. No? So, yes, there are a lot of works, and there are a few more in small pieces in private collections. Mostly House of Precast, because that was where, parang ano niya yun eh, it was his playground. The family of the founders of House of Precast said na every day he would visit, or he would often visit and make parang mga relief models, no, for different possible projects, or even just play around with clay, no, and the works that he ended up with some of them are there. No? Yesterday, when I was preparing for this talk, I was quite bothered kasi may isang, I couldn't remember that web online reference, mga Monty daw, pero the small sculptures are not his. No, I should actually write to whoever wrote that kasi hindi mga Monty yung sinama doon, except for yung attribution nga kay Monty for the 3 angels in the Quezon Memorial Shrine. So I hope I answered your question.
Okay, so sir, in the middle row. Yeah.
Pero hindi naman siya yun. Kasi when it was complete, hindi ko alam kailan kasi namatay siya 1950.
Good afternoon, ma'am. I'm Henry Estipona. I'm heritage enthusiast. I have question to 3 of each, but I want to ask Ms. Herrera. Were you able to present your paper abroad? Because for cultural diplomacy, we appropriated Monty as ours, and when he was awarded by the king, he was become a property by humanity as a whole. I remember. Hello, and then I surmise that because of art diplomacy, it influenced the election of the Pope. Because a year after the election of the Pope, before the Stephanie Leon, an artist, a professor from the Boston College of Art History, in tandem with the Italian Academy in Italy, lectured about an sculptural painting based in Vatican. It's all about the confrontation of the Pope Leo to Attila the Hun. So I surmise it affects or influences the election of the American Pope. So my question is the role of cultural diplomacy in the election of the Pope. My question to Sir Chair, how do you define the taste of First Lady? Is he more on the modernist and Madame Imelda is in the conservative? But the question to Madame is, can you explain to us the 2026 Madrid upcoming Asia, how do you call it, when open calls for papers? It's a cultural for film.
Sorry, could you repeat your question for Ma'am Eloy?
I researched your credentials that you were was a scholar of this Asia Pacific Film Conference, and there will be having like an open call papers for the Madrid 2026 conference. It is open for the public and not yet declared there. When will exactly be the opening or the submission of the paper? Thank you.
Oo, yeah, yung pinag-uusapan namin, yung art of soft power, no? I can't really answer your question about the election of the Pope. Hindi tayo kasama sa conclave, no? Pero if you are to, if I remember, if I heard you correctly, you said a phrase na, Monty is ours, di ba? I don't think we can own him. I think it's enough to acknowledge that he lived a prolific and productive and happy life here in Manila, which he would always say. I don't think hindi naman niya dinena yung kanyang pagiging Italian because obviously, but that was part of his practice. So that's how I would answer your question.
Okay, let's have last two questions. No? Okay, so one more from
Good afternoon po. My question is for Mr. Gino Gonzalez. First of all, Sir Gino, I'm a huge fan of yours. So I really wanted to know more about the history or the research that you did on the women's terno and how it reflects your work. So my question for you, Sir Gino, is how, as a historian and scenographer, my question is, how do you balance historical accuracy with historical accuracy of the terno and artistic license in portraying women in film and in your stage plays po? As well as my second question, two-part po siya. Do you think that reviving the modern, the revival of the terno or modernity of terno risk romanticizing the past, or is it a tool for us to actually, is it a tool to reassert women's, Filipino women's narrative? That's all po.
Okay, to answer the first question, it really depends on the production and the director. No? For instance, for the movie Larawan, we didn't, I can't say we were successful, but we tried to make it as close to the period as possible, because it had to be a period production. But for instance, we did one cover for Armida Sigion Reina for Pop Lola. It was a terno, but we did it out of Jersey back in the early 2000s. So it looked like an Adidas jersey. So iba yung goals ng dalawang projects na yun eh. So I think as a designer, I need to be able to shift. No, parang I think I needed to have a versatility. No, for instance, in TernoCon kasi, it's not necessarily a group of like-minded people. So we have a lot of debates internally as to what we should allow, what we shouldn't allow, etc. But I think we're all open to a dialogue. Oh, hindi kami sarado na ako, kailangan, I'm not a purist either. I'd like to listen to what the young people have to say or what their point of view is. At the same time, I also have to be able to tell them, okay, I think you've crossed a line and you need to step back a bit, yung ganon. And then, what was the second question? Revival. Well, first of all, it really depends on the designer. For example, Hannah Adrias, the young designer who won in 2020, designed a terno collection inspired by military garments. And the first time she brought that collection to the meeting hall, parang we were all captivated. Parang all of the other contestants got so insecure looking at her work. But you're talking about young people in the room. Now, she won that contest, but afterwards, there was a kind of backlash from the old guard who were very vocal that this is not how it should look like. But I was telling them also, but this is how her generation sees the terno. So you have to give them some kind of space or wiggle room, to interpret the terno for their own generation. Because the terno of the past is not their terno anymore, and we cannot impose that on them. But at the same time, before people or before designers stylize something, they have to be able to know the tenets or the classicist tenets first. So, for instance, I forced them to build a 1920s terno themselves first before they move on to the stylization or, as you can say, a bastardization. So, kailangan alam mo yung point A before you go to point B. Did I answer? More or less. Anyway, regarding women's romanticization, a garment like a terno, like a tabarong, inherently connected yan to the past. It's like a string. So no matter what you do, you're connected to it. That's why when a woman walks over in a room or walks into a room wearing a terno, parang for me, sometimes, whether it be a short terno or a jacket terno, parang it commands attention. Because in my brain, I'm wired to think that this garment signifies dignity. Yung ganon. So meron siyang subliminal message na nababasa ko. And I think it's ultimately your choice as a woman whether you want to romanticize the past or to move forward. But if in moving forward, you cannot just move forward without acknowledging what happened before. It's impossible, I think. That's why it's not, for instance, the terno is not like a gown or a suit, no? It's on the level of a national garment because it represents identity.
So with that, it's interesting to see that even up to today, we still have this idea of navigating our identity and being able to showcase this to a wider audience, which even back then we've been toying with this idea, and up to now this is still a question that we still continually ask and continually try to answer in different ways. And in the interest of time, though, further questions we'll just do it one-on-one later during the break. But for now, I'd like to thank our speakers in this panel for a very, very interesting discussion. And with that, we'll proceed to a awarding of certificates. So I'd like to call on our division chief, our architect Arnulfo Dado, and our host Deco Empleo.
Thank you so much for our presenters, Ms. Herrera, Dr. Hernandez, and Mr. Gonzalez for sharing their expertise on this subject matter. We will now award the Certificate of Appreciation. It is read as, Certificate of Appreciation is given to for their valuable time and expertise as a resource person during the Making Modernity, the Art Deco Centennial Lectures 1925-2005. On May 31, 2025 from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. at the Auditorium, National Museum of Fine Arts. Given this 31st day of May 2025 at the National Museum of the Philippines, Manila. Signed by Dr. Eric B. Cerudo, Executive Director of the National Commission for Culture and the Arts, and Director General Jeremy Barnes, National Museum of the Philippines. For photo opportunities, please gather at the center our presenters with Architect Arnulfo F. Dado. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, everyone. Before we proceed to our third and last session for this symposium, we will have another 15-minute coffee and bio break. We will resume at 3:25. Thank you so much.
Our final session will tackle women's history and tourism and sports. So please come back.
Hi everyone. We'd like to announce that the food will be distributed po, so you could please remain in your seats. Okay, thank you.